it's July 7th and we find ourselves in the book of Jonah. First thing we need to ask ourselves is, did the events in this book really happen? Specifically, did Jonah actually spend 3 days in the belly of a fish? Well, if you believe that Jesus Christ is God, then the answer is 100% yes. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, Jesus uses Jonah's time in the fish as a parallel to the 3 days that he would be dead and then rise again. In other words, just like Jonah did, so will I. Jesus has this great habit of affirming many of the passages Bible skeptics like to attack. In chapter 1, God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh, to tell them that God was going to destroy Nineveh because of their evil. Now, it's interesting to note that while many Old Testament prophets prophesied about foreign nations, Jonah was the only one who actually went to a foreign nation to prophesy about them. But Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh. For reasons that he'll explain in chapter 4, instead he went the opposite direction to Joppa and boarded a ship headed for Tarshish. God causes a storm to halt Jonah's escape. Jonah asks the sailors to throw him overboard to save them, and as soon as they do, the storm stops and the sailors worship God. And then God causes a big fish to swallow Jonah. Chapter 2 is Jonah's prayer he prays while in the fish. Notice in verses 5 through 7 that Jonah was at the bottom of the ocean. It says weeds wrapped around his head at the roots of the mountains. That's where he was before he prayed to God to save him. How often is prayer the last thing that we do once we've done everything else to try and fix our situation? It should be the first thing we do in all circumstances. After 3 days, God has the fish vomit, yes, vomit Jonah out on dry land. The mission hadn't changed. Jonah was still going to Nineveh, just like God wanted, only now he was out the money that he paid for his boat ticket and he smelled like throw up. It's always better to follow God the first time. In chapter 3, Jonah delivers God's message. In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. Notice it's just a statement. There's no unless you stop sinning condition to stop the destruction. However, the Ninevites believe Jonah and turn from their sin, thinking maybe God will have mercy on them. Who knows? And God did have mercy on them, and he did not destroy the city. And in chapter 4, Jonah told God, I knew you were going to do this. Why? In verse 2, he says, that is why I fled to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Jonah knew that if Nineveh was warned, they might turn from their sin. And if they turned from their sin, God might not destroy them. But Jonah wanted Nineveh destroyed. He didn't want to give them the chance to be saved, which is why he ran the opposite direction of Nineveh. Jonah is now so upset that Nineveh might not be destroyed that he asks God to end his life then and there. Jonah then went east of Nineveh to watch what was going to happen to the city. He was still holding out hope that God might still destroy Nineveh. God causes a shade plant to grow up for Jonah and then die over the course of 24 hours. Jonah is so upset that the plant died that he says he wants to die because of that too. Jonah is really kind of a drama queen. Anyway, God points out to Jonah that he cares more about that plant than the 120,000 people who were saved because of the message Jonah delivered. Talk about wrong priorities. And that's how the book ends. So what can we take away from today's book? First, ability and opportunity to sin are not God's permission to sin. Jonah had the money to buy a boat ticket and there was room on the boat for Jonah, but Jonah was still sinning by going away from Nineveh. Second, pray first, not last. Jonah waited until he was on the ocean floor before he cried out to God. God is our best resource for everything. Don't waste your time trying to get help from anyone or anything less. Third, we know from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, that God wants to save everyone. Not everyone will be saved, but all are given the opportunity. God even wants to save people as sinful as the Ninevites. My prayer for us today is that we'd obey God the first time he directs us. Things always go better that way. And that we would not mistake ability and opportunity to sin as God's permission to sin. It's not. And that we would pray first in all things, and that we would see all people the way God does, not as ungodly, but in need of God, just like we were once, and honestly still are. If you haven't done so already, please download our Through the Bible reading plan at AsperiaCommunityChurch.org/throughthebible. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.